Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Now you're welcome along. Happy to say Gordon Darcy's with us. Hey, Gordon.
Good evening, Joe. How are you keeping?
Very well. Brief tangent. This business with the Wexford Hurlers. I haven't spoken to you since I saw that news. That's very interesting. You approach them, they approach you. Something you were looking to do. What are you doing?
Probably a conversation for another day. Just helping out.
You've gone GAA already. Just keeping the head down, is it? Just say nothing. Oh my God. Okay, no comment. This is how it is. I understand. You can't. No, listen. I get it. You've gone native here. This is no comment, and we move on. I understand. Let's talk France against Ireland then at the Stade de France. What's your overall feeling on how Ireland should feel about this performance?
It's confused, I would say, is probably a good way to probably feel. Could have won the game. Probably, on balance, France may have felt a little bit aggrieved had we won the game, but we still could have won the game. It was quite an interesting game. I think there's so many positives in it from an Irish perspective, and something like we've known for ages. There's no doubt on the character or the effort from the team. A little bit maybe on the accuracy, but France played a pressure game, and they picked some big individuals to play it, and we struggled with that for large parts of the game. So I kind of made it a reference after the New Zealand game, which was quite surprised, was their inability to kind of make any changes on the field. So Sean Edwards has largely had since that game to get ready for Ireland, and they deployed a few things that we just didn't really cope with on the day.
You're right when you say it's complicated, because I've listened to even just two different podcasts back to back today, and two Irish internationals who know the game inside out. One said if the game had gone on for another 5-10 minutes, Ireland would have won, and the other said if the game had gone on for another 5-10 minutes, France would have pulled away. So there's contrasting opinions on this thing all over the place.
Well, my Magic 8 Ball says I'm not sure. So, ifs and ands and pots and pans. That's just sticking a finger in the air and saying, I believe this. It's unprovable. It's it's not an argument based on anything factual. At the end of the whistle, Ireland lost the game. So that's the bit we kind of have to work within. I looked at it, when France picked 6 forwards on the bench, that's not something they've routinely done. So that was a big, chapeau, tip of the cap to the way Ireland were playing. And what I loved about the character from the Irish players was there was plenty of reasons to bail and to lose in the second half, and they did, and they stuck at it, and they got they got the tempo and they got the quick ruck, and they showed that they can score and come back into games. But it's just there's a physical, emotional, and mental toll to having to absorb that amount of pressure in the first half.
Why is a 6-2 split doff at the cap to Ireland?
Well, because it meant that it's not if, when the game needed to be closed out, they could replace 6 big forwards with 6 very big forwards. It makes it like you're changing the whole front row. You're changing 2 second rows potentially. It's psychologically it can be quite hard to play that.
So where do you want to start in this? The chronological view is that Ireland were shell-shocked and did well to hang in there, and then somewhere in the second half, would you agree we're in the ascendancy quite certainly and clearly in the ascendancy for maybe 20-25 minutes?
Yeah, I think France played a very measured game, but what I liked about it from an Irish perspective is nothing was working for Ireland in the first half, really. But yet we didn't cough up a lot of tries. We coughed up penalties, and a lot of the penalties, some of them are just directly related to French pressure. An Irish mistake, but coming off of scrappy set piece, which is again linked to French pressure. So what Ireland needed was the break. And when halftime came, they were able to make changes. You could see the line out was a different beast in the second half. We got primary possession that we know we were able to play off, and we scored 2 tries directly off of lineouts. So remember, like, it's not just the Irish perspective, and there's two teams going really respecting each other, and I think that played out in the game of two halves. But if you look at the try that France scored off the back of our two, again, it was built off of a pressure and a mistake from an Irish perspective. But the brutality and the physical element of it, the flair was nowhere near there when Bai was crashing over that line. That was, we need to win this game any way we possibly can. And I think that's probably maybe when you were talking about the 6-2 split on the bench, that's the bit to say, we can actually go to a plan B here we will need a plan B to be able to play with Ireland, because we've shown that if you stand toe to toe with Ireland and try to play rugby with them, Ireland are better equipped for that game for 80 minutes.
You mentioned 80 minutes there. In your Irish Times piece, you cited the bench as a weakness for Ireland in certain positions.
Yeah, like I think I would put it was in practical terms that the French got more from their bench than we did, and I think that was probably fair to say. Actually, the second row, one of the second rows that came on, I'm not even going to try and get his name, but he actually coughed up the penalties that brought Ireland back into it, but then was able to slow down our ruck at various pieces at various times in the game. I think what I was talking about on the bench, I think man for man, we look about the comparative impact that the bench has had, and I think the French got more from their players coming on.
So, in particular, dream scenario, where would the Irish bench improve?
Well, I'm not sure it necessarily can. I think I don't think there was any massive question marks over the 23 going into the game. So, but
when I say dream scenario, I'm pushing you towards that thing you don't want to do, which is to name names or name positions.
Yeah, I don't think we got as much in the front row. Danji, and he came on. He did well. After about 15 minutes, found his feet. But I think, I'm not going to go in and start naming names. So it's not my particular style. So I think just in general, the bench didn't deliver as the impact as we normally had. I think where our bench has been very good is when we have had an assailable lead that they have come on to be able to close out games. But
yes.
I'm not sure our bench really delivers a game change or a step change. Ian Henson and Robbie Henshaw aside, I think they, the quality of where we can look onto there is not there. And I think, that was probably blown out of proportion in the November series when everyone's saying, we have genuine strength and depth, and we have that. In that microcosm of the 3 games that we played, yes, but in the broader context, we still only have 120 players playing professional rugby. The difference between, say, what Ireland and France can do, England and France can do against the Celtic nations is they have invariably 15 to 20 players playing in every position, between a starter and a bench that's probably English or French qualified.
Yeah.
So they have that opportunity to pick on form, which we don't have in a lot of positions. We have to pick. We have to find a pecking order, and we go with that.
Yeah, because look, I'm sure people can read between the lines, and it's no slight on anybody, but I mean, if Tyke Furlong and Andrew Porter are playing 72 and 73 minutes, that is a big ask, and that's not optimum. I mean, what's a good number for you these days for props to be playing? Is it kind of 65 minutes territory? You feel like you're really running on empty?
But I suppose you've answered your question yourself. It's dependent on who's in behind and who's in front. We have a world class. We've arguably the best starting front row in the world, and we are having to play them for as long as we possibly can in games, and that's going to take there's a nutritional toll on there for players. And you look at, particularly in scrummaging and the contact in Tyke Furlong, and just the way he plays it. When he's not dazzling with out the back passes, he is running over Uni Antonio, one of the few players he probably cops off 20 kgs to, and he's running straight into him and over. So that's physical, like that physicality that he plays. We can't have him playing every game. And I suppose this is the age old. As I was talking to, we only have a finite amount of players playing in Ireland. That we do need to find. That we need to find players, and if the players there are the ones we're going with, then we have to accept results like this.
Benches are curious things. Like, you make a really interesting point there. There's the bench that you want to bring on to see out a game when you have a lead, and then there's the bench that you want to bring on when you have to chase the game. So that strikes me as very true of Conor Murray as well. Do you want a blast of tempo? And I mean this, you, as a player, you've been there, you've done it, you're in the Stade de France. Do you want a blast of tempo coming in at scrum half with 20 minutes to go, or do you want what Conor Murray's bringing? That's a kind of interesting question as well.
Well, I'd ask that question in a slightly different fashion. Is the step change the right step change between the type of player that Gibson Park is and Conor Murray is, or we're so ingrained in the pattern, in the approach we're taking for this team at the moment, which is phenomenal. So I would have thought a player that mirrors that type of approach would be the best to have. So you're bringing on fresher legs in the kind of same ilk as Gibson Park. So a John Cooney, or a Kieran Marmion, or a I've got a brain fart from Casey from Munster. Surely they look like they will fit that style a little bit better.
Well,
But Joe,
yes.
you're, and this is the unfortunate thing with sport. You pick through the bones afterwards and go, do you know what? It would have been great to have someone to increase the tempo. Connor's come on and closed out countless games, and and that's you're judged very, very harshly with hindsight. And it'd be easy to say now, it's like, if we had a Gavin Coombs there, if you had a Marty Moore that came on, and you can throw names about, you can say them in and say, but the reality is they're not playing regularly enough, and it's probably, it can be a little bit lazy to kind of retrospectively pick through the ashes of it and say, well, I would have done this or I would have done that.
Listen, I appreciate the queasiness of, we're not even Monday morning quarterbacking here, it's Wednesday, so we've had a lot of time to quarterback the thing. However, the point, the way I would put it to you is, let's imagine we're talking the way Andy Farrell and Paul O'Connell and his team should be talking. So what did we learn from that game? Do we need to think about tempo at scrum half going forward? So the way I'm putting the question to you, don't worry so much, I suppose, about looking back, but looking to the future, looking to a World Cup. Is it Murray you want off the bench to quote unquote see games out, or do you want that injection? That's the way to frame it, I suppose.
Well, I would think I don't think that's necessarily the answer to the question. I'm not sure that's the question. I think how we responded to the French defence line is probably the bigger. We weren't able to respond and evolve on the pitch with the way they were picking specific rucks to counter ruck, and when they were spreading the line and they were sending the high shooter at the first receiver to try and get us to not pass the ball. And we largely did what their defence, not largely, at important moments, we did what their defence wanted us to do.
Yeah.
So I think how we responded to that, because if we were able to, unpick one or two of those pressure penalties that we gave away in the first half by what we were doing, better decisions, better composure with the ball in hand, you take 6 points off that, and then that changes the dynamic of the game, and it also changes the energy resource that the Irish team are distributing. Because when you're soaking up that amount of pressure, this Irish team, when they're playing really, really well, they hog the possession and they hog the territory, and that reflects on the scoreboard. What France did was they didn't allow us to monopolise either of those two, and we had to play with even possession, even territory, and this was the net result. So we have to be able to find a way to win with a lower possession and a lower territory. And again, if that's not achievable with the group of players we have, then we have to accept results like this will happen.
Yes, look, every team has its ceiling, and it's entirely possible we have a ceiling that doesn't have us as the best team in the world. You mentioned the breakdown there, and the French plan really working a treat at the breakdown. maybe naively, I would have considered Ireland, especially since O'Connell's returned to the fold, and certainly under Joe Schmidt, as really competitive at the breakdown. Were you surprised with what you saw from Ireland there?
No, like, it was a game of two halves, because if you look at our breakdown in the first half, like, it was linked to poor primary possession. So I was more surprised that our lineout didn't function. So we had 8 lineouts. One of them was a free kick to us, and the other 7 were unplayable. We won them, but they were unplayable. So we never got to fire a shot really in the first half. So we had no choice but to soak pressure, and the French were a lot more accurate in the first half. So we were playing, like, the majority of our launch play came from slow, stationary set piece, or the ball spilled out and was coming from a slow, medium ruck, which the French just didn't contest that ruck, spread out, shot up at the first receiver, and then targeted other rucks. Yeah. So it became quite of a hard place for Ireland to play out. And then you're kind of going, Joey hasn't played a huge amount of football and didn't necessarily have the feel as to how to build a kick to counteract that kind of line speed. It's pretty important for someone like him to get exposure in these big games. And like, the overriding feeling for me with someone like Joey was he needs more game times to be able to flow at this level.
And so to what extent did he flow then?
I think, like, he was fitting into the game plan to what we wanted. But again, you can have the best plan in the world till you get punched in the face. Yeah. And Ireland largely got punched in the face in the first half. And then we went back into the changing room. Everybody got what they needed to change. The line-out functioned. We won our primary possession, and we were playing on front foot balls. So it looked a lot more integrated, looked a lot more seamless in the second half. Particularly, Gibson Park's try was a prime example of what Ireland were trying to achieve, and they did that. And I think that was, and even with that, playing on the back foot, Joey was composed, did as much as he could do, and I think he didn't try to overforce his hand and overplay, even though we were leaking points in the penalties. I think that was as valuable to us, getting us to the second hand. We didn't overplay, we didn't force it. You fix the primary possession piece, and suddenly we're playing on the front foot. He looked dangerous. He was, a couple of the steps and a little bit of acceleration that we're so used to him seeing. He fits the way Ireland want to play this game very naturally. He just needs to catch a break and get some games.
Yeah. I don't know what you thought the gap was in advance of the game, or where you thought the two teams were, but having watched the game now, what do you feel? Is there a big gap here between these teams, or it's neck and neck and could depend on a given night, or you would expect, say, France to win comfortably again if they were to play 10 times in Paris?
Yeah, I don't think there is a huge gap between the players, between the teams. I think what the French have at their disposal is the ability to pick quality on form, and we don't necessarily have all that. We have to, not that we don't have quality, but that we have to pick within the confines of our playing structures. I think we have a much more evolved and developed game plan has the potential to deliver more results. But it is predicated on a functioning set piece. And what France showed is that they they were able to disrupt our set piece, which has a knock-on effect into the ruck speed and into the net result of what Ireland do. But it also, I think, from the French perspective, is they showed I wouldn't say a fragility, but they showed, it probably is a mental fragility, that they weren't able to ram home what was quite a comfortable lead. They did score after, we scored 2 tries, but, that last 10 minutes, you do have to wonder a little bit more composure from an Irish team. Would the pressure have gotten the better of this French team? Now, we know they do have quality in this area as well. They did manage they were ahead comfortably against New Zealand. But it seemed like the result mattered so much to them in the last 15 minutes. They were determined not to lose it rather than to to continue to play. But we just couldn't. It just looked like we were out on our feet, and we couldn't land that decisive blow.
Yes, which I guess ties into your bench point in part. I think perhaps for the French psychologically, the reason they did tighten up is that the result is all important. This could be a milestone for them because, I mean, they have a habit of coughing up silly results when they should win. And so, maybe this is the first step towards them eradicating that. And so we got a version of it this time, and then they'll be a bit better the next time. And God, in another year, they'll become very good at closing out those situations. And you kind of sense that in the way they celebrated and the way they targeted this game almost. So they're in a very interesting place as well, you suspect, psychologically, and no better test than Murrayfield, this bogey ground for them with 10 minutes to go. I mean, I kind of anticipate them now being less likely to make a mess of these things, having got over the game on Saturday.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I think they're definitely, and they've been very open about it, saying this is a long-term plan for them with the World Cup in mind next year. You wouldn't say they're peaking, but they are showing passages of play and individuals within that are irresistible to watch at times. I would think, as you were talking there, that the Irish, there will be such a what if from the match, because not firing really one attack in the first half will really wrangle with this team, because when you're talking, one of the things, the flip side of putting that 6-2 split on the bench is they are big men, and they don't like being moved around. And that's the one card Ireland didn't play, which is every philosophy, every approach has a counter to it. And we really only got to do it for 20 minutes. But I think we had spent so much prior to that it's just human nature. It's just what happens in big games. It wasn't one person having a shocker. 3-4 individual mistakes in the second half cost you possession, cost you momentum. France come back into it, and they have their one, that moment before their energy reserves tipple out. And then the last 10 minutes was just frantic. But I think that will be somewhere we'll look in the first half and go, we really hurt ourselves by not being as accurate as we could have been in the first half, particularly at line out. And I think that's the bit where all the folks will come back on and just go, this is where we should have been. We should have had this. This should have been where we built some sort of a counter against the French.
Well, that's a good perspective to hear, because my layman's view, just watching it, just feeling it, thinking about it as you're watching it, is frankly, they pulverised us. Huge men, killed us at the breakdown, killed us in contact. Yeah, okay, the line out I take, I mean, I probably hadn't put enough stock on the importance of the line out to Ireland, but my sense was, oh my God, we've just been bashed here, and this Matt Hansen freak has somehow kept us alive. So, your I guess point that something like a line out functioning would dramatically change things is almost good to hear. Could I ask you as well about the fact that France only scored 2 tries? Because again, I think when they're sitting down, they must be thinking, well, that's not a great return. We're unlikely to dominate like that for such a big period of the game. First try goes in. Yeah. First try goes in, we're all thinking, oh my God, they're going to tear us apart. And then the second try is, I guess, a glimpse of their power inside the Irish 22 and what they could do, which begs the question, why did neither happen a whole lot more?
Well, I think in large part it was just Ireland. There's an attitude piece there, and I suppose that ruthlessness, relentlessness, and the never give up. If you look at where Ireland did have, remember they did have 50% of possession in the first half. They just, not in areas that France were able to overly exploit, and we gave away, was it 5 kickable penalties in the first? No, it was 19, so 4 kickable penalties. So a lot of the pressure came from France choosing to take points rather than going for the corner as well. So, a different approach from them. And you would think from their perspective, being 19-7 going in at half time and then being 22-7 after 3 minutes in the second half, going, this is okay. We've got this. But the fact is, and again, he's just so big. But like, we didn't get to expose Wilmse until Gibson Park got that. Like, you saw his body language when he's coming around the corner. If we had the opportunity to build some phase play in the first half off of genuine functioning lineout, because what everybody's doing at the lineout is the refs are forcing the defensive lines to stay back the 10 until the ball goes through the middle of till it moves the midpoint of the line out. So that's why you see Josh van der Fleer splitting out, and you see all these hookers and scrum and back rows breaking off and feeding, because it means the attacker getting over the gain line almost instantly off line out. So that's why the line out play has been so valuable at the moment, because it's a guaranteed way to get over the gain line. So if you go back to the New Zealand game, you go back to the Welsh game, you look at all our line-out plays, we'll get over the gain line almost instantly with the quick ruck, and then it's moved again almost instantly. And that is really, really, really hard to defend. But we didn't get an opportunity to get a first ruck over the gain line on any one of our 8 line-outs. So we were, running to stand still for that. And that's why you have that feeling of, good God, we were pulverized in that, because we're not designed to give the ball on a one-off runner to Josh van der Fleer and for him to run as hard as he pulled into Paul Wilmse and Unia Antonio and then fight to get his knee on the ground so we can have that ruck.
Yeah.
But like, what point is that 3-5 second ruck? Because all Wilmse does is let go of him. Antonio stands there, waits for him to go to ground. We put 3 players into it and they both leave the ruck. So suddenly we have got 3 people on the ground plus the scrum half, and they've got 15 across the field. So that's why you had that overarching feeling of, say, we're just running into mountains. We were, but then we were still, and I think it's the tale of two halves. I'm repeating myself now, but then as soon as we won the line out, we showed what we can do. We got over the gain line quickly. Gibson Park is there, and it's that move tempo, and it's hard to live with.
Joey Carberry was on OTB AM this morning. Full interview up on YouTube and available to podcast. And you won't be shocked to hear he is very much standing by the decision on 72 minutes. Have a listen.
Is there any parts of you that are going, well, we should just talk this through again, and would we make the same decision if that occurs or reoccurs?
I suppose you can always take learnings from it, but I think still looking back on it, I think it was the right call. Brought it to within 3 points with 9 minutes left. I think, who knows, we get back in, we get within anywhere in the halfway, and Conor Murray or myself back ourselves to kick from there. So I think it was the right call at the time. And yeah, looking back on it, I'd still, if I was to go back in time and do it again, I'd do the same thing. And
the extra focus that comes now from these games, all these big decisions are going to be played out again and again and again in the media. That's just something you guys have to live with, I suspect.
Definitely. Like, anyone knows that hindsight's a great thing, and people could be like, oh, if you kicked to the corner and you scored the 7, then you would have won. But you don't know. France could have come back, and you just don't know. I suppose we all still think to this day that it's the right call, and that's what we have to go on. We're the ones out on the pitch, and we were the ones who live by it. So yeah, I think we're deadly right.
So Joey Carberry there. Anyone I've spoken to on the show over the last number of days thinks it was the wrong decision, and so I've had to play devil's advocate and get into some weird territory of trying to give various theories as to why a draw was a good result, and frankly I've made a fool of myself at various junctures. Are you another they should have kicked for the corner merchant?
Yeah, what I was surprised with was the level of discussion around it, and that was the bit that was surprising to me. I'm not sure why there was a discussion. He knew it was in Joey's range, so it didn't seem like anybody was really kind of knew what the right decision was. And like, you don't expect the players to say anything other than what they're saying. They have a bonus point. The bit that if we scored, we may not have gotten the kick, and you might have still been 1 point, and they could have back scored, but we would have had 4 try bonus point as well. I think the bit that I was on comms, the bit that I could hear was I could hear somebody shouting, "Take the points." So I don't know that caused more confusion. So I don't if I'm hearing it on comms, it's got to be someone pretty close to the touchline, and it's not some punter in the crowd. So you think that came from an Irish voice on the sidelines. So whether that confused things, and then the referee pushed for decision, and then you've almost made, sometimes your mouth's moving before your head is, and it's like, oh, take the points. It's like, oh, should I have said that?
Yeah. And I mean, it's been so talked about, and maybe people have had their fill of the fixation on it. But do you want to just give the argument as to why, for you, it was fairly clear-cut go for the corner?
Well, yeah. Well, I think, as I said, for me, we have a losing bonus point. The extra 3 points getting us closer doesn't necessarily, it doesn't add any immediate value. I've yet to play in a team that you strategically go for a draw, particularly in the Six Nations. And also that would have come out if that was a decision. And the fact you go for the corner, you've scored off the previous corner line out drive, you scored off your the last line out attack as well. And if you only get the try and miss the conversion, you get a extra bonus point for the 4 tries. So, a losing bonus point goes to 2 losing bonus points. Yeah. Jeez, I'd hate to be in a position now where, that's, it's mischievous to say, we lose the tournament by one bonus point. Yeah.
No, it is very interesting. Do you suspect, based on what you know of team environments, they're absolutely all going to hold the line publicly? I was not surprised Joey Carberry backed the decision, Andy Farrell backed the decision. I suspect that will continue. Do you think behind the scenes they'll be saying something different to each other today?
I'd say there's a chat going on with the decision making process. Like I was surprised so many players were around the ball, and I'd say maybe this wasn't an area that was crystal clear going into the game about if we're in positions X, Y, and Z again, that there is no debate, there is no thing. It's crystal clear. And sometimes, and this is not to say this is not the same attention to detail within the squad, but it seems to be a much more freer and putting an awful lot more responsibility on the players to make decisions and to come up with solutions, things like that. So maybe this is just one of those things that fell between the cracks. Like, I think as well, it'll be important for James Ryan to understand that if you think back, I think it was Chris Robshaw elected to kick for a corner, I think, in a Rugby World Cup. Yeah. But the 3 points would have actually been enough. And you're kind of like, since then the value of these decisions has, like, the value of kicking for corner, the margins for success become so narrow and so small that the importance of captains getting these right has become way more important probably since 2015. So there will need to be a little bit of focus on this to say, listen, hopefully we got the bonus point. There isn't any massive downside other than we're all talking about it, but that it doesn't happen again, because if it happens again, that kind of pause to go, what are we doing, where are we going? From a leadership perspective, that would probably that can have an impact.
Yeah. Listen, brilliant analysis. Thanks so much for coming on. Much appreciated, Gordon Darcy. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers. Gordon Darcy with us there. Rugby coverage here and Off the Ball is with Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us. You can catch a whole array of rugby over the last couple of days. I think we'll take a break from it now. We've done enough, but we've certainly had Gordon Darcy this evening, Brian Driscoll last night, with Liam Toll and Keith Wood on Monday. OTB AM have had Alan Quinlan. Interview with Joey Carberry today, waiting for you, and plenty more besides. So you're well and truly covered on the Ireland-France front, I think.
Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.